Where do you come from? Where are you going? As we ponder these questions about our own identities, we also wonder at the path of our religious tradition, the moments and choices that have shaped who we have become as a faith and where we are going. My colleague, Reverend Josh Pawelek, offers a caveat to this history. The story I will now tell you focuses on relationships between white UUs and African American, African diaspora, and Black UUs. That is, the racial dynamics in this story have to do with the place of African Americans in our larger white denomination in the late 1960s. We must remember Black people are not the only people of color within Unitarian Universalism. There are Native American, Latinx, Asian, Middle Eastern, South Pacific Islander UUs, not to mention biracial and multiracial UUs. Their stories are not in the story I'm about to tell. I'm naming this simply so that we don't forget our denominational story about race is expansive. It is so much more than a black and white story. Reverend Mark Morrison Reed is one of Unitarian Universalism's greatest historians, chronicling a history of broken promises and a moment of deep conflict within our faith. Morrison Reed writes, "Some ask why African Americans have not joined the liberal religious congregations in larger numbers. Well, go back as far as you like, and you will find African Americans. However, they were often unsought and unwelcomed, scattered in time and place, and with a few exceptions, never formed a critical mass within a Unitarian or a Universalist congregation. And the occasions where that did happen can be traced to very specific activist ministers and committed congregations in exclusively metropolitan settings that had a significant African American middle class. The truth was that neither the Universalist Church of America nor the American Unitarian Association, separate at that time, neither of them ever gave sustained backing to African American congregations that were trying to emerge. Furthermore, prior to 1969, only 2 African Americans held significant positions of power within the denomination. Unitarian Universalism had never developed forms of worship, nor liturgy, writings, music, or theology reflective of the African American experience. Black folks came to UU congregations, not the other way around." Morrison Reed goes on to describe this moment of 1967. When it arrived, there was nothing around which to build a specifically African American UU identity, and no natural interface with the African American community at that time. After 100 years of squandered opportunities, he writes, the consequences had come home to roost that year. After Martin Luther King's assassination, as rioting engulfed city after city, it became clear that legislation had not addressed African American poverty or frustration. And that was the context for an emergency conference of UU leaders at the Biltmore Hotel in New York in October 1967. 37 of the 150 attendees were African Americans. They made up 25% of a gathering and in a denomination where they only comprised 1%, hailing from the urban churches in a faith community that at that time was becoming more and more suburban. Soon after the conference began, 33 of the African Americans withdrew from the planned agenda to hold their own meeting. The Black Caucus met through the evening and late into the night. As they talked, they tapped into the raw emotion. Civil rights had changed the law, but had proven ineffective at remedying Black poverty. Likewise, liberal religion had failed to address the experience of Blackness or settle an African American in a major pulpit. The group called for a new agenda, and by the time they emerged, the Black Unitarian Universalist Caucus Steering Committee had been formed. They insisted that their agenda be voted up or down without debate, And that included a resolution that $1 million, which was, at that time, 12% of the UUA budget, be directed toward the Black community over a period of 4 years. Well, the conference sent shockwaves through the UUA. For many, what happened during the ensuing years would be nothing less than life-defining. A paradigm shift away from integration and toward Black self-determination was taking place, a change for which the UUA was ill-prepared at that time. 2 years later, and after more factionalism about strategy and facing a funding crisis, the UUA board reduced the Black Affairs Council annual allocation that they had previously voted to approve, spreading it over 5 years. In response, the Black Affairs Council disaffiliated, left the church. And at this 1970 General Assembly, delegates voted to discontinue funding entirely. Although the Black Affairs Council received funding from other sources and functioned for a few more years after that, the promise remained unfulfilled. Many people of all racial identities left Unitarian Universalism in response to those events. The pain, anger, and heartbreak still reverberate through our faith these more than 50 years later. I see parallels with Tony Stringer's family story. The Unitarian Universalist faith has had opportunities throughout its history to choose Blackness, to choose to align with Black UUs who were ready to lead, to determine their own expression of the faith, liturgy, and language, and to invite others to follow. Here we are again, with certain recent events resonating with that moment in history I just shared. See, there is an internal map that spans generations. Shea Stewart had a mentor who once said, "You simply lean back into your ancestors, and there they are." Sankofa teaches us that we must go back to our roots in order to move forward. That is, we should reach back and gather the best of what our past has to teach us so that we can achieve our full potential as we move forward. Whatever we have lost, forgotten, forgone, or been stripped of can be reclaimed, revived, preserved, perpetuated. Let us not forget the times our religious ancestors failed to choose Blackness. Let us revive the dream, and from the embers of that desire, spark a new flame that supports and loves Black expressions of Unitarian Universalism. Let us protect it and tend to it as the precious blessing that it is to our faith, to our lives, all of ours. In 2015, the seeds of Black lives of Unitarian Universalism were first planted. Those seeds have been cultivated. They have borne fruit today, and Unitarian Universalism is making good on its promise to resource and to uplift Black UU lives. Now, for the first time, we have more people of color in leadership at the UUA. We have more ministers of color and seminarians. We have new liturgies. We have spiritual ideologies forming. We have language. And we have before us an invitation to emerge into a different future. This is the blessing of Sankofa, that though our histories hold pain and triumph, they make us who we are. We take refuge in those old stories of survival, those old stories of shame. We can learn from them all as we chart our course, and we know where we belong in the trajectory of our legacy, always emerging and taking new shape amidst the backdrop of our family story. Tony's family chose Blackness when they could have chosen otherwise. Unitarian Universalism can do the same now. Takia Nur Amin says, "In every moment, life is giving us an invitation." I really believe that in every moment, life is giving us an invitation to do the things that are the most loving and life-affirming, and that doing the loving and life-affirming thing is always the answer when you don't know what to do or when you are feeling unsure. There's always a moment of invitation to rethink or reevaluate, to do it better. We are being invited into this cosmic dance of renewal and joy and justice. But you have to make the justice. It doesn't just show up without our participation or our effort. Things don't just get better just by us waiting for them to happen. No. We all have to engage in the better making from wherever we are, and each moment presents an invitation for us to do that. And I don't want us to forget that. Even if, like me, you are tired or feeling frustrated or feeling unsure, the invitation to participate in a manner that is about living our values, living that love and justice, it's still there, no matter what else is going on. So ask yourself, what is the most loving, life-affirming thing that I can do in this moment for myself and for other people? To me, if we're talking about racial justice, love is about acknowledging that there has been wrong, that there has been harm perpetuated, and whether you personally feel like you participated in it or not, you could be benefiting from the inequitable results of that harm. Even if you are a person who wants to say, well, I didn't participate in making things this way, if you are benefiting from the ill-gotten gains, then you have some responsibility to make things right. This is what I teach my children, especially if you turn around and say that you believe in justice and equity. You are not let off the hook, no matter what. That is part of the call. The mandate of what it is to be Unitarian Universalist, to figure out how we live together in loving, equitable, and just relationship with one another. Each moment is an invitation to participate and to heal, emerging from our family stories, emerging from our shared history into our mysterious future.